Welcome in. It is a Clippers Talk Live. Didn't think I'd be doing this so soon. If anybody can hear me, let me know in the chat. Would appreciate it. Just put up the tweet at FollowAdamA on X. I am suited and booted because today was Clippers Media Day. So why am I already back from Intuit Dome, which was closer than I would have thought it was, coming from Burbank here? I'm feeling good about that part of it. I have had some hearing issues as of late. This ETD issue, it's a little bit muffled. And so at Media Day, the microphone was going in and out and was very low. So after about Norman Powell, I realized I couldn't hear that much. So I thought I'd just come back. And I'd start this live stream here, and I'd give some commentary on what happened at Media Day and go through some of the quotes with you guys. Once again, if you can hear me, if you are out there, let me know here in the chat. Here's my guy, JMI1324. I'm guessing he can hear. Welcome into Clippers Talk. This is a live edition. I'm Adam Osland. I still have the tie on, still have the media credential on. A bit of a frustrating day for me since it's usually one of my favorites, but I don't know. I couldn't hear that well there. Jeffrey Beltran says, come say hi to the supporter section. I will try to do that. Extra Ernie TV says, it's that time again. We back, Clip Gang. We are. Appreciate everyone for coming in here. I'm going to keep this going for a while. I don't know how long. I got a couple of caffeinated beverages right here. I'm going to drink through these. I'm going to sort through some of the quotes. In fact, let me grab my notes. I will be back in 2 seconds. Maybe we can go through in order of the guys who are up at the podium today and go through some of the quotes that are coming out currently. I'll just pull up La Murray here. I'll pull up Farbod Essenshari I saw there. Joey Lynn was doing some really good reporting there. Justin Russo, of course. And just try to give you everything that was of note, you could say, from today's media day. Starting with Norman Powell. He came to the podium first. Was excited about that. He said he was super excited to get the season started, was ready to go. He was asked if he wants to start this year. I believe that was Law Murray who posed that question. He said, I want to start every year. I'm excited to get back to that and show in training camp that I should be starting, and I'm ready to fill whatever void or whatever is needed for the team. Norman Powell came across very, very confident in his presser. Holo Dolo says, I loved how all the guys said they are aware of the outside noise and motivated to prove them wrong. That's something else Norman Powell talked about. He said that he thought it was wild, basically, I'm paraphrasing, that a lot of people had the Clippers basically written off. They had them as 12th in the West. So a little bit of added motivation there, I think, not just from Norman Powell, but yes, it was a theme going on. Last week, Tyronn Lue said he wants this Clippers team to get out and transition more and take more threes. This is coming from Justin Russo. So Norman Powell was asked about that. Powell said he thinks it suits him well and this team quite well, and noted the analytical side of things that shooting more threes is good. It is, guys. Shooting 33% from three is the equivalent of 50% from two. So even if you are under league average, which is about 36% from three, you shoot 33% at high volume, that can still be good. That's exactly what the Boston Celtics shot at high volume in the NBA Finals, and they were able to take out the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. A lot of that was due to the three-point shooting and playing the analytics game. Norman Powell talked about the offseason, said he read a few books, said he was doing some meditation, didn't exactly say darkness retreat, didn't go Aaron Rodgers with it, but was taking care of his mental health, I guess. This was interesting. Norman Powell said, I know media and outlets like to write us off because we don't have PG anymore. We're losing Russell Westbrook. And he brought up the point, Norm, that that 1920 Toronto Raptors year after Kawhi Leonard left to become a Clipper, they were still a top team in the Eastern Conference. They were still a top 5 seed. Jeffrey Beltran said, wait, you're not here anymore? No, I had trouble hearing with the microphone. I know it was going in and out at times, seemed a little bit low. I looked to my right and asked Tomer Azarli. He said it was bad too. So maybe it wasn't just my hearing, I hope, because I've had some issues, but there's no issue when I'm plugged in and have an amplifier. It's basically a hearing aid when I'm doing radio. And I have my headphones on and I can control the volume. So I thought I'd just come back home and I would start this live stream and I will keep it going for some time here. So join in, hang out. I'm not going anywhere over the next hour. Maybe we'll have some guests on too, post media day and everybody getting up there at the podium. Norman Powell, one of the last things he said was he's really excited to continue to prove the media wrong. Nicholas Batum, he was next. He came up, talked about anticipating this season, how it's a new beginning. Got a lot of new guys that he's excited to play with, new arena, new jerseys. They're wearing the blue, new logo. Everything is new. Quote, can't wait to play a game in this place now at Intuit Dome. Nico Batum said there were a couple offers out there, but he was talking to head coach Sharon Liu and, quote, it was pretty much what I wanted to do for me and my family. And Coach Liu was the guy I want to play for. Quote, I signed here after a really bad time in Charlotte, and Coach Liu saved his career. That's nothing new. We've heard him say that for a long time now. He joked, don't expect me to score 25 points in reference to the team losing Paul George and Russell Westbrook and him filling that void. He also joked over the summer he tried to beat Team USA, but couldn't do it. He was great, though. Then it was James Harden, who was third. As Jeffrey Beltran says, we appreciate you, bro, listening from the supporters section. Right on. I did see some people there that said they were listening to the podcast on the way into Intuit Dome because I know there's a ton of fans there today. They made it available to a lot of people. Matthew Ajimi says, are we really going into training camp with PJ and no four other than Batum? Other than Kawhi, other than Kobe Brown, other than sliding up Amir Coffey. More on that in a little bit, but you realize Kawhi started at the 4 all last season, my friends. So hopefully he is available. More on that coming up with some of those quotes coming from Kawhi. But we'll go in order here. James Harden was next after Nico Batum. He was asked how his role changes. Aggressive. We tried to last year to where we tried to figure it out. Guys in their roles, it's kind of difficult when you got that high caliber of players or Hall of Famers. It was pretty difficult. Certainly started off that way with James Harden, where they were 0-5. That was when Russ was in the backcourt with him before making the change to bring in Terrence Mann there. James Harden said that this year there's a pretty clear space on what he needs to be doing. On his decision to re-sign with the Clippers this offseason, and this is coming from Justin Rousseau, who I saw there, was hanging out with. He said, James Harden said, quote, I'm home, and I don't plan on going anywhere else. I want to leave a legacy, especially here. That is big. That is a pretty cool statement. Matthew Ajimi follows up now, talking about the 4 spot. Isn't 4 too tough on Kawhi's body? I don't know. It seems like you're moving around less when you're playing the 4, and he just played 68 games last season. You can say yes, but then he hit the wall, wasn't able to play in the playoffs. Well, it's not like playing the 3 kept him away from injuries. He tore the ACL. He had the meniscus injury playing the 3, and he played less games during the regular season than he did last season. So I don't think there's anything definitive to say that the 4 is too tough on Kawhi's body, because in theory, the 3 probably racks up more mileage per game with chasing guys around the perimeter more, where as you play the 4, you are restricted a little bit more to the paint and guys trying to back you down, and maybe that actually makes it a little bit easier. He says, gotcha. Now, Kawhi Leonard, of note, last season at one point did say, I'll play it until we get a real one. So do they have a real one? Nico Batum could be that guy, but I don't know if he's going to be playing more than 20 minutes per night on average. So therefore, can you really start him Those guys typically are going to be playing 25 plus minutes, upwards of 30 minutes for some of the starters. I don't know if Nico Batum would be able to do that. Shark in the Box says your starters, Uno, Norm, Kawhi, DJJ, and Zu. Is that something coming out from Coach Lue at this moment? Is he at the podium? I don't even know if it's for sure happening where, Derrick Jones Jr. is at the podium right now. We'll catch up to that because Coach Lue and Lawrence Frank talked last week. Let's get to Kawhi Leonard, guys. I did post at Follow Adam A a good chunk of his press conference, about 6 minutes of it, if you want to check that out on Twitter, on X. And here was Kawhi Leonard on how he's feeling. Quote, "We're taking it day by day. Everything's been great for the past month, but they're being very cautious for reasons." This is something I have said in trying to bring some hope and some optimism to the situation with Kawhi and why he's being held out of drills at training camp. They could just be so overly cautious right now. They could be understandably proceeding with an abundance of caution so that, it's training camp. Do they really need to push Kawhi then? I don't think so. He's 33. He's been through this. He's not going to learn anything more there. And if they just want to strengthen the knee right now, it makes sense. Why risk inflammation at training camp when you're trying to have him complete a playoff series for the first time since the bubble in 2020? Or at least since the first round of 2021 against the Dallas Mavericks. Complete a playoff run, you could say. Holo Dolo said when Harden was asked about Kawhi, he said he should take his time. Seems like Uno is confident in him making the playoffs regardless of his availability. I think it's more so he just knows the main goal is for Kawhi to be available when games are most important, when it's a playoff series. Now, I would make the argument that to get to the playoffs, they're going to need him as well. Without Paul George, with the way they've reconstructed this team offensively, they could really struggle at times. I think, of course, James Harden is that floor raiser for the team, and that's big. And if he's available for 65 plus, 70 plus games, huge for the Clippers. But make no mistake, in this really tough Western Conference, the gauntlet that it is, they are going to need Kawhi Leonard during the regular season. You can't just hold him out till March like some people have said over the years. Just wait then and then start playing him as the playoffs come around, because you wait that long, you may not have him. You may not be in a playoff series to have him available. More on Kawhi Leonard. He said the team is making sure he's healthy for the important moments. There you go. On his removal from Team USA, Kawhi said, "I thank them for the opportunity. Things came out of nowhere, and it was out of my control." Leonard said he was glad they got a gold medal. Kawhi said the plan is for him to play on opening night. He was asked about that. Lawrence Frank was not committal on it last week. Non-committal was Lawrence Frank on him playing opening night last week. Kawhi said he doesn't want to miss games, of course. Quote, "It all depends on what we want and what we figure out. I think it is a positive to think I will play, but we're taking it day by day." Nobody knows at this point, guys. I'm telling you. They have to see how the knee responds to training camp and the strengthening of the knee during their time in Hawaii and back here 5 days later. No one can know. Kawhi doesn't know at this point. There is another juicy quote coming out from Norman Powell that I will bring up to you guys in just a little bit here. So I know I'm going a little bit out of order, but I want to keep going here. After Kawhi Leonard, and we can talk about that in the comments, I'm just kind of give you the quick rundown and gloss over some of the main points and talking points and quotes coming out of today's media day, which is still ongoing. My understanding currently is Derrick Jones Jr. is at the podium. We'll bring you some of those quotes too, but still going in order. Next up was Ivica Zubac. He says he thinks he's going to see an increased offensive workload this season. Good. Need that. Quote, "Just being patient when I get the ball down there, taking my time, using my body, my strength, and my height." Ivica Zubac on the new arena. It's great having something you can call your own. It's going to help a lot with scheduling, getting a better schedule for the season, not getting as many early games like we did in the past. I think that's going to be big for us. Norman Powell also touched upon that a little bit. He said the afternoon starts he didn't mind that as much, but he still likes the fact that they are a priority now with their own arena. Ivica Zubac said he was very happy this summer when the team re-signed James Harden. Quote, I think this year we're going to take another step. That season, those reps are going to help. This year's only going to be better. That is really something we're counting on. That's huge because, look, they had to learn on the fly. 10 games in, they bring in James Harden. I mentioned a little bit earlier that obviously it took some time before they got on that big run, 31-game stretch. They go 26-5, but it was a learning curve. And he and James were doing the right things. After practice, they were putting in the work. They were doing what they could to develop that pick and roll chemistry. It's going to be much more refined, and you're going to see more high pick and roll with James Harden. That was something Coach Lou said last week. We're going to run more high pick and roll as they should. He's a pick and roll master, one of the best in the game to ever do it. Old Dirty Dasher says, did you attend? Yes, I was there for, I guess, the first half of it, but I don't know. My hearing's not great. The microphone was low, and it went in and out a few times, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go home, start the live stream, react to some of these quotes. John Rodriguez says, seeing everyone's Twitter post at Media Day is getting me hyped. Were the jerseys just as nice in person than the pictures? The jerseys are real nice, real and spectacular. They were wearing the blue ones. They're beautiful. I heard complaints initially about the new logo. I'm hearing less and less of those as people are warming up to it. The alternate logos, everybody loved immediately. Same with the jerseys. That is a hit. Going back to the cursive, they got a red jersey coming out too. No complaints there. Izzo said, I'm telling you right now, James is going to start the season off averaging 27 points. I think that's aspirational. He's 35 years of age. He only played 34 minutes per game last season with the Clippers. That was a low for, I want to say, since leaving OKC. I don't think he's averaged 27. Maybe 25, maybe 24. He's not going to go from averaging 11 points per game. I know Paul George isn't here anymore and Kawhi could be missing, but he's not going from 11 points to 27 points. I think that's going to be difficult. And he's also going to be setting the table a ton. If he has to put up that many shots, I don't know if the Clippers are in a good space or a good place. Jonathan Ing says, how was it being there and having the fans in the vicinity for Media Day? Saw some of the fans. I saw some of them, but I really didn't get a chance to interact. I was in the media room. I was hanging out with Brian Seaman a little bit, La Murray, Justin Russo, Tomer, Azarli. So I can't really comment too much on how that atmosphere was with the fans there, as I'm still looking for a little bit more clarity with, I believe it's Derek Jones Jr. at the podium. I want to see if we have any quotes regarding DJJ. Now we got something from, this was Terrence Mann about a half hour ago. He said, this comes from Joey Lynn, we're going to be a real competitive team. We got a lot of dogs on our roster. I'll go to war with all the guys we picked up. He said the Clippers see the media noise and they're hungry to prove it wrong. I like that. Fashizzle Badizzle. I was referencing the amount of points he averaged, shots he averaged last season. I shouldn't have said points. You're right. James Harden was at 11 shot attempts per game. He averaged 16 points per game last season. Going up 11 points is probably a lot to ask, but I appreciate pointing that out. I need to clarify. He attempted 11 shots per game last season. Poetic Tube asks, does this mean Norman Powell starting is still a possibility? I think it's a distinct possibility. I think Norman Powell has a bullseye on trying to be in the starting lineup because that has been his goal for a long time. That has been his motivation. He said, Norman Powell was first at the podium, quote, I want to start every year. This is nothing new from Norm. He thinks in his mind he should be starting. And without Paul George, we talked about this last week with Law Murray, there's less of an excuse for him not starting. Now, the point would be, where's his defense at? Where's his defense and where is his playmaking at? If you want to start next to James Harden, who, yes, will have the ball in his hands a ton, but you still need to be a better passer and connector out there if you're Norman Powell. And you have to play better defense if you're going to be in the starting backcourt next to James Harden, or else this Clippers defense, the identity they're trying to build on that end, if you get cooked at the point of attack, it makes things really difficult on your bigs, on Ivica Zubac, on everybody else, secondary rim defenders like Kawhi Leonard. It makes things so much more difficult. Mike Dang says, James passed up a lot of shots last season, trying to figure things out. This season, he just needs to be more aggressive, as he said. Yes, he does. Agree with all of that. I just don't know if he's going to go from 11 shots per game to 20 shots per game like that. Maybe I could see 16, 17 shots a game. I could see that. Jonathan Ing says, looks like the first day of school. It kind of is like that. Old Dirty Dasher says, best case scenario for me is barely making the play-in tournament. That's best case, barely making the play-in, barely being 10th. I think that's overly negative. I think even if Kawhi Leonard only played 40 games, that they would have a good shot of still being 8th or 9th. But we'll see. Holo Dolo says, maybe I'm wrong, but I think James will also have a say in who his backcourt running mate will be, not just Ty Lue. I agree with that. I think James Harden carries a lot of weight. The comfortability of James Harden in the backcourt really is going to define this team offensively. So whoever he feels most comfortable playing next to, I think is huge. So if he wants a guy who's going to be a gunner from the outside, and Norm is not going to pass down shots like we have seen with Terrence Mann over the years, where he's just not aggressive enough, he hasn't put up enough three-pointers, you don't have to worry about that with Norman Powell. What you do have to worry about then is him guarding the other team's two guard or point guard. If he tries to guard up and guards their three, or they try to hide him there against a three that's not much of a score, I think he's going to get picked on a little bit. Now, if he takes up the challenge of playing better defense, then I really think Norman Powell is much more in the running for the starting two-guard spot. But we haven't seen that much as a Clipper. He was better last season defensively, but I want to see Toronto Raptors level Norman Powell defense. That's when I thought, coming out of UCLA, guys, he hung his hat on his defense. That's what he did. That's what he was known for. Nobody thought he would get to this point offensively where he'd become one of the most efficient scorers in the league. Not just coming off the bench, just efficiency, period. Shooting 44% from three with the amount he took. Norman Powell has been damn impressive there with the progress and development throughout his career at this level with his offense. It's his defense that has slipped maybe a little bit because of it. That Mexican Nara says Norman really needs to step it up. Averaging 12 points with 19 minutes is not enough now. I want to say he was at 14 points per game last season, which, is not going to be enough. Also, most likely, depending on what else happens. 13.9 points per game. He was playing 26 minutes. So could his minutes go up? Could his scoring go up? Norman Powell, for sure, that could happen. I would imagine his efficiency would go down a little bit if that happens. But if he's only shooting 41% from the outside and he's taking more three-pointers, you're fine with that. Last season, Norman Powell was at 5 three-pointers taken per game. That's about what he's been averaging the last 4 seasons or so, going back to his last year with the Portland Trail Blazers. But Norm's got a gun. He's got to be a gunner. He's got to be on the aggressive side of things in looking for his offense. And I think he's well aware of that. Because here's the quote that people are talking about from Norman Powell that is very interesting and a little bit juicy. And I don't know, because I was there when he said it today at Media Day, if he meant it in a way that was necessarily a shot at Paul George. But the quote is the quote, and I will quote it. Norman Powell said this on losing Paul George. Quote, I saw it as addition by subtraction, more guys getting opportunities, including myself. That is going to make the rounds, guys. That is going to be something that we are talking about coming out of this media day with. Again, on losing Paul George, quote, I saw it as addition by subtraction, more guys getting opportunities, including myself. You can see this as two different things here. A shot, a barb towards Paul George, or Norman Powell just being happy to get more opportunities. And that's the way he phrased it. Given the way he was talking about being more aggressive, trying to be a starter, I lean towards that's how he meant it. But maybe there's something more to it. Maybe there was, I don't know, was there locker room issues between him and Paul George? I don't know. Reen Zaret says Norm standing on business. Mio says, love that line. I'm getting a Powell jersey on that quote alone. So the fans like it. I can understand why. There were times over the last 2 seasons where people are saying Norman Powell was the third best player on this Clippers team, or at least the third best scorer, because he would actually go out there looking to shoot, looking to score. And Paul George at times, he'd have those games where he'd be up and down between game to game, between quarter to quarter with his aggressiveness. Matthew Ajimi says, I love it. Hope we hear more shots from other players. Let it be known then. Let them speak their mind. If you're looking at per 36 minutes with Norman Powell last season, he was still only at 14 attempts per game, but the 2 seasons before that, 16 attempts per game, 18 a game, but that was only in 5 games. Remember, he broke his foot, I think, in a game against Portland in Portland right away as a Clipper. That was unfortunate. I would look for him to get around 15 shots per game. But there could be more competition than we are realizing. And yes, the Powell Rangers for real, Reen Zarat said. Norman Powell, we went into last season saying, is Norm a tradable piece? To saying, oh my God, he's so critical to this team. He has helped solidify one of the best lineups in the NBA and the Clippers' best lineup, which was starters, but Norm in for Terrence Mann. So him next to, it was James Harden, Norm, PG, Kawhi, and Ivica Zubac. They were nuking. Their efficiency was off the charts. JMI 1324 said, it was a shot at PG, rightfully so. Both are sending shots at each other, and I love it. If you guys have a quote from Paul George earlier today, by the way, because I know it was Phillies Media Day, send it over here. I'll read it, but it's got to be from somebody I trust. I don't want any fake news quotes coming from Paul George. I trust you guys. I love you all, but I might have to double source it right now. Here's Joey Lynn talking with Kevin Porter Jr., discussing counseling, what he's learned during that time away from the league and his journey back to the NBA. Kevin Porter Jr. said, for me, I've always believed in myself. I know my truth. I felt like I had a good fight getting back. Definitely didn't count myself out. We'll look for more on this, but KPJ was made available to the media. I am pulling quotes from our lovely reporters and media members and the local beat writers that I encourage you guys to support. Now I'm at Justin Russo. He has a video up from Tomer Azarli talking with Steve Ballmer as they were in a different section of the arena at one point. Why don't I see what a good friend Tomer Azarli has been posting. He's going to be on with me Wednesday from Hawaii. He'll be at training camp. Again, I want to reset a couple of things here. Norman Powell and the Clippers have made it a theme to say they feel disrespected basically by the media. Norman Powell said this, and he was first up, quote, outlets are writing us off. We lost PG, lost Russ, and we're the 12th seed, which is crazy to me. At least that's what they were saying. I've been a team where we've lost a superstar and we still got a top 5 seed the next year. He's referring to being with Toronto. They lost Kawhi. He comes to the Clippers. They were still a top team in the East. The whole was greater than the sum of its parts. C is saying, it's media day. Is media day over? What are you doing back home? The microphone was low for me. My hearing's not great right now, so I was having trouble picking up on any quotes, and the mic was going in and out a little bit. I just thought I'd come home and I'd do some analysis on some of this stuff instead. Holo Dolo said, Harden saying he's excited for Zu in terms of having a bigger offensive load is great. It just validates what all of us fans have been saying for so long. I don't think it's lost on the Clippers that Ivica Zubac needs to be a bigger part of the offense. There just needs to be a more consistent, concerted effort to getting him the basketball on a nightly basis. That's it. It's not that they have, and I've joked at times, it looks like they're freezing him out. It's just when you have so many Hall of Famers like they have had over the years, especially last year, you can get lost in the shuffle. But now, it is a necessity. It is non-negotiable. You either get Ivica Zubac involved early and often, or you are going to struggle offensively. He and James Harden, I expect, 2 of the first 5 times down the floor in the first quarter to be running high pick and roll, and everything else should be working off of that. Jonathan Ing said, PG said it was the first time in his presser that it was the first time he was playing with an elite big and elite point guard at the same time. I did see that. He is factually correct for the first time. I guess that is an accurate statement. I'm hoping Ivica Zubac can still prove, as he's going to be 27 throughout most of this season until March, that he can be an elite big and an offensive focal point. That's what I want to see. Double sourced it right here. JMI 1324 said the same thing. People are overreacting to it. Yeah, I didn't take that as much of a slight. For the first time playing with an elite big and an elite point guard, that's a fair statement from Paul George. Renee Zerat says, what's the famous Geno Smith quote? They wrote me off, but I didn't write back. I love that one. Love Geno Smith for that one. Amina Sean said, man, I'm still concerned for Kawhi. As am I, but no more concerned than I was coming into this. No less either, I guess. They're taking it day by day, basically, guys. We're going to be updated as this goes along, we hope, during training camp, how he's doing with the strengthening of the right knee. But we're not going to know for a bit whether or not he's playing opening night, October 23rd against the Phoenix Suns, because they have to see how his knee responds. So follow Lob Murray, follow Justin Russo, follow Tamara Zarley, follow Joey Lynn, follow the great reporters, Miriam Swanson. Saw her today too. Mike Dang says, we'll see what PG says when Philly fans are killing him halfway through the season. I don't know. I think he's going to start off hot. Now, Philly is notorious for being tough on their stars, especially. You get paid there, great. They pat you on the back and say, go prove it. We know what happened to Tobias Harris. It completely killed his confidence. I'm rooting for him in Detroit now. I'm still a Tobias Harris fan, but they chewed him up and spit him out a little bit. And it really wasn't his fault. They chose him over Jimmy Butler. That was a decision by Elton Brand. Was Tobias supposed to turn down that much money? No, he wasn't. They traded a lot for him. They felt like they had to pay him. That Mexican R says, I would still trade Norm in some seconds for Dante plus salary filler. I don't see Norm getting better. Hopefully he proves me wrong. I can see Dante starting for us. Do you think Minnesota's trying to trade him? They just traded for him. Great. Takes 2 to tango. I don't know if they're doing that because he is the better defender with probably a little bit higher upside. Dante DiVincenzo. He's had some injury stuff, but overall had a great season last year. Helped the Knicks get to the second round. They lost to Indiana. He put up 15 per game on 12 shots. He shot 40% from the outside. He is the better defender, and he played 81 games. So after a couple of seasons where he only played 42 games, he only played 25 games. The last 2 seasons, he's been much more durable. Dante DiVincenzo, Dante's Inferno when he gets hot. 72 games his last year with Golden State, and then last season, his first year with New York, 81 games. I don't think they just brought him in to trade him. That was a big get. That's a bigger get to me than Julius Randle in trading Karl Anthony Towns. And he's younger, slightly. No, he's a good 4 years younger than Norman Powell. Amina Sean says, when PG comes back to Intuit Dome, we get to see him get locked by DJJ again. I hope so. That's what I'm looking forward to. Derrick Jones Jr. put the clamps on him in that first round series, and that was the first guy that the Clippers made a splash with as soon as it was announced that talks had broken off between them and Paul George the first day of free agency, and they went out and got Derrick Jones Jr. Coincidence? Just going to sip my tea here. I don't think so. Why not the Clippers? Said, I'm so excited to see what the new roster brings. I am too, guys. I could see them finishing anywhere between 6 and 10. Much of that is just dependent on Kawhi and availability. But this roster defensively, I think, has the potential to be a top 8 defense, and I think they need to be if they want to be the 6th seed. They have to hang their hat on their defense, period. Halo Dolo says, the first 10 to 15 games are probably going to tell us a lot about the season and how it's going to go or how it's going to look like. Excited for the preseason games as well. Me too. I haven't been this excited for preseason in a long time because so many guys are competing for spots. Coach Lou said not just one spot is open, but 2. Utah, give me 2. Shout out PMS. Yeah. Guys are going to be fighting and battling in camp, and that brings out the best. The competition, the iron sharpening iron. I'm going to have coverage from guys in Hawaii all this week for training camp. And then on AM 570 LA Sports on Saturday, I think a pregame show starting at 3 for Clippers and Golden State Warriors from Honolulu, Hawaii. Why not the Clippers says, I'm so excited to see. Yes, I already read this one, Adam, you dumbass. JMI 1324 says, can someone explain to me what a hate watch is and why you do it? I think that's when people get off on drinking too much haterade and enjoying the downfall of others. Schadenfreude. Jonathan Ing says, will you be at Front Wave Arena for the game on 10-8 versus the Nets? I will be in Oceanside for that one. I'm excited. Amina Sean says, I think a 7th seed is probably a better bet considering Kawhi at most is playing 55 or 52 games. Very interesting specifics. 52, I could see 55, but then 52, that's a very specific number there. We have no idea, guys. I don't want to project too much. I'll say this. I don't think he's playing any back-to-backs. I didn't think that before we heard the swelling is almost gone. So that puts him at most, if he's not playing any back-to-backs, at 66 games. Timothy Albinu says, what's your opinion on Larry Nance Jr.? He would be a nice option if the Hawks go into sell mode in the last year of an $11.2 million deal. Is that accurate? He is in the last year? First of all, I'm a big fan of Larry Nance Jr. I am. Hustle guy at the 4 spot. He can play center too. He's versatile. He hasn't turned into a great three-point shooter. He only, in his career, averages 1 attempt per game, 34% from the outside. Would have been nice to see him stretch the floor a little bit more in that area. It's never really materialized, but I like him for 20 minutes a game. If you could pull that off, I'd say it would be a wise move. But I'm guessing because other teams know the value of him, that it's not going to be easy to grab him. And you could say, I'm not sure if you trade for him at this point, you'd have his bird rights coming out of, yes, him being in the last year of an $11 million deal, Larry Nance Jr. He'll be an unrestricted free agent next season. I'm not sure how that would work cap-wise. It might be difficult to retain him. Therefore, he's a rental. You got to look at that part of it too. Luis Lemus says, damn, I hate the Sixers. Maybe he's responding to JMI 1324 saying why people hate watch. Why do you do it? They don't like Paul George now, I guess, so they're hating on the Sixers. C's says, I don't know about y'all, but Harden got me hyped. Kawhi can join when he's ready. Let's go. I've said this over the last week since that presser last Tuesday, hearing about Kawhi's health. Wasn't exactly encouraged, wasn't dismayed, but, you know, if it's true that he had surgery in May and the swelling's almost gone now, it's almost 5 months. It doesn't make me feel great about it. They're obviously going to have to manage it, and he can't do drills right now, or is not going to, at least in training camp. At that point, I said, it looks like it's James Harden's team for now. When Kawhi's available, he'll take the majority of the shots. And hopefully he'll be back at the same level he played at last season, which was elite, top 5. And when he set the all-time record for efficiency during a 30-game stretch where he shot 57% from the floor and 51% from the outside while getting 26 per game, nobody had ever done that in NBA history. As long as he's back to that when he is available, then yeah, when he's out there, it's his team. But it could be James Harden because of his position, because of his availability, running the show all the time, and he's going to be the hub on offense. Regardless if Kawhi is there or not, he's the hub because he's the playmaker. He's that traditional point guard. He'll be the guy everybody's playing off of. But when Kawhi's not there, he's looking to score even more. Holo Dolo says, this team gives me 2022 Warriors vibes. I'm not saying we are winning at all. However, nobody expected the Warriors to do anything that year, but they shocked a lot of people. They had guys step up. Andrew Wiggins had his best season and was magnificent in the playoffs. Jordan Poole was big for them that year. Kuminga had a few moments. And they got enough out of Klay Thompson, who wasn't the same, but was good enough. And Steph Curry and Draymond Green played at a very high level still. I don't hate the comp. Might be too lofty, but I'd like it to play out that way. Amina Sean said, what's funny is L. Frank keeps lying to us. Elaborate on that. In what way? Can you expand on that, or are you just making some vague general statement that you hope gets attention on here? And I probably shouldn't even brought it up. Didn't screen it beforehand. Matthew Ajimi says, it's our year. Hey, that is the quote from Will Updike. This is our year. I think it's tongue-in-cheek, and he's being ironically funny about it, since if there was a time to not believe it is the Clippers' year after Paul George left, it would be now. I don't know. Stranger things have happened in the NBA. I'm looking for some more quotes here. Looking for stuff from Derek Jones Jr., DJJ. Who should I check out here in the comments section? You know what? I'll go back to Joey Lynn. I like his reporting for SI Now. Shout out Joey Lynn. Still not seen anything on Derek Jones Jr. Maybe he didn't talk that much. Mike Dang said KPJ going for the 2022 Jordan Poole role. That's interesting. Mike, Big Mike. I don't hate that idea, honestly. We know how talented Kevin Porter Jr. is. The off-the-court issues and transgressions have been talked about enough on here. I want to focus on the court right now, especially on a day like today, on media day. But the last full season in the NBA, 19 points per game, almost 6 assists to 3 turnovers. Played 59 games, started 59 games, was getting 34 minutes a night. And he is a league average three-point shooter at 36%. Can he be better than that on a better team with more catch and shoot threes? If anybody has the number on Kevin Porter Jr. catch and shoot threes, put it in here, because I'd be interested to know what that was. It looked like, wow. According to a thread on Reddit, in 2022, he shot 48% on catch and shoot threes. In 2023, so was that the start of the 22-23 season? Let me see here. I don't want to put out any inaccurate news. That just seems unbelievably good. That would be a very high percentage from the outside. And I would be all here for it. Yeah, during the 21-22 season, Kevin Porter Jr. was at 48.2% on catch and shoot threes. Guys, that's kind of a revelation. Kevin Porter Jr. in the 21-22 season was at 48.2% on catch and shoot threes. I'm looking at an article in July of 2024 from athlonsports.com. Ooh, that is encouraging, to say the least. That's special. That is a guy that can knock him down. Now, my guess is the reason why his three-point shooting overall that season wasn't nearly that high is because he didn't get a lot of them or didn't take enough of them. But when you were one of the focal points of the offense for the Houston Rockets, that year he did shoot about 38% from three, but 48% on catch and shoot threes in the 21-22 season? Damn. And I'm looking at 42% on catch and shoot threes for KPJ in the 22-23 season. Ooh, that is interesting. Mo Hassin says, fingers crossed Kai Jones can grab the last two-way. We will see. He's basically on a prove-it type of deal right now. It's a non-guaranteed camp invite contract, but they have a slot open. One more two-way spot. Luis Lemus says, I like the Clippers' grit now that soft PG is gone. Old Dirty Dasher says, players have not played enough together to have a good year. Sorry, just being extra pessimistic this year. It's noticeable. We can all tell. I think given how good Ivica Zubac and James Harden looked over about a month and a half stretch before Zubac had that calf injury, I think they're going to be better than that this season together. And that tandem is going to thrive, and they need to. So I think there's a lot of positives there. It's James Harden getting a training camp with this team now. That's much more chemistry built up, much more of an ability to mesh and meld some real continuity. Luis Lemus says, if Kawhi is not able to go, I want to see Norm in the starting lineup. So that is one of the possibilities here. I brought it up last night. We had the guys on, Brandon Marcus and Matt Warren, formerly of Sports Ethos. Now they have, and I think a new one, or the first one, is coming out today. The inaugural voyage of Talking Ships is coming out, their new podcast. Love those guys. Check it out. But I made the point that if Kawhi's not able to go opening night, and we can throw this around here, guys, if he's not able to go opening night, who do you want in the starting lineup? Because it could not only affect who replaces Kawhi, but who starts next to James Harden. Because look at it this way. If everything in this ideal situation with everyone healthy and everyone's available, I would say go James Harden next to Terrence Mann. There's continuity there. Terrence Mann started 71 games last season. With Derek Jones Jr. at the 3, with Kawhi at the 4, with Ivica Zubac at the 5. But if Kawhi's not available, that kind of upends things. Because then you say, well, do they need more scoring? Therefore, you start Norman Powell next to James Harden. Could you then slide up Terrence Mann to the 3, DJJ to the 4, and Ivica Zubac to the 5? Maybe. I don't know. Does Batum then start at the 4, and you keep Terrence Mann where he is at the 2? These are the questions. This is the uncertainty going into the season, and some of what makes it interesting. They just have a lot of options. I'm excited to see which direction they go, because obviously if you're trying to get more buckets and more offense and have more of a scoring punch to start off games, you go with Norman Powell. But that hurts you defensively. There's no perfect guy unless KPJ really emerges in training camp and says, I'm playing defense at a really high level and I can score. Then I guess you start him at the 2, but I think that's kind of a long shot right now. So you either go with offense with Norman Powell, more defense with Terrence Mann. You can also go with Batum at the 4 versus Derek Jones Jr. sliding up to the 4. There's a lot of different combinations if Kawhi is not available. That Mexican Nara says, I feel KPJ is being slept on. Maybe so. Amin Ashan says, I want to see those DJJ lobs, Derek Jones Jr. lobs. Halo Dolo says, I think Ty Lue looked at that exact same stat, and that's why he made those comments. Maybe so, guys. That is something. The 21-22 season, Kevin Porter Jr. shot 48% on catch and shoot threes. And the 22-23 season was at 43.5%, so even above 42%. If he's playing off ball more and getting more open looks next to James Harden or whoever else is out there, if he just has less of the defense angled his way like he did in Houston because he was one of their better players, so more attention went his way. If defenses get lost and leave him off ball, That could be a bucket. That's a revelation. I'm telling you. Amina Sean says those lobs from Harden to DJJ are going to be amazing. They're going to feed families. Mike Dang says, I'm optimistic this year. Every time they count us out, we have an exciting season. This Clippers team traditionally has overachieved when counted out. We saw it the 17-18 year where they still won 42 games after they traded Blake. We saw it the 18-19 year after they traded Tobias, still making the playoffs and then pushing maybe the best team of all time, the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, to 6 games. So there's good reason to believe that's true. The 21-22 season, the most recent of these, I don't want to say little engine that could teams, but teams with lesser talent that banded together to overcome losses from injuries. They didn't have Kawhi that entire year. They had Paul George for just 31 games, and they still had a winning record. Made the play-in, lost the first game, lost Paul George the second game, and lost to the Pelicans after I think they had a 13-point lead in that fourth quarter. That one still frustrates me to the point it leaves me tongue-tied, that play-in game. Mo Hassin says, do you think Van Gundy will help us be a top 8 in defense? Yes, he will only help. They will not be a 17th ranked defensive team this year in defensive rating. They will not be that bad. They can't be that bad. If they are, the season's cooked and maybe they won't make the plan. They can't be that bad defensively again because I don't think they're going to be 4th offensively like they were this past season. And at times, they were doing otherworldly things on offense. I don't count on that. I still think, though, they could be a top 12 offense, maybe even a top 10 offense. Just going off the data and the history with James Harden. Yes, I know he's older, but his offenses over his last 12 seasons, and he has led pretty much all of them, he's the guy, have never ranked worse than 12th. And on average, they have been 5th. I don't expect 5th, but can they be 8 through 12? Somewhere in there? 10 through 12? I think so. And if you combine that with a top 10 or top 8 defense, I think they need to be top 8 on the defensive end. Then you have a top 10 net rating. Top 10 net rating is the goal to me overall. You marry those two things where you're a top 12 offense and a top 8 defense, you get a top 10 net rating. That's what matters. Uncle Mike says, bro, you finally did your homework on KPJ. Well, Coach Lue gave me reason to last week, really. After he said, and I want to quote this correctly, because this changed everything of the way I read the situation with Kevin Porter Jr., this quote was everything to me, guys. Here's what Coach Lue said last week. Quote, for us to have success, he's going to have to be a big part of that. That changes everything. I didn't know how he viewed KPJ. We still don't know if he's going to be suspended or not. How many games that could be if he is suspended. When it comes, if it comes early enough, he can miss the preseason. That would hurt his chances. So it's fair to say I've been dismissive at times because you just don't even know if he's playing yet. If he's suspended early on in the season with all these guys vying for different positions and roles on the Clippers, it would be a major setback for him. So I'm kind of letting this play out a little bit more, but I've gotten more familiar with his game, even though I knew him, even though if you watch the initial podcast, when we got the news live on Clips and Dip, and I was cheering it on, and I was big on the move. Now, that also came before I knew everything that would happen with him off the court. And that was extremely disappointing. And I understand it's controversial and will be scrutinized. But if we're just talking on the court, I have done more and more research on KPJ because Coach Lue is a fan. He said there's a reason he was getting paid $20 million per year. He's a big-time talent. And this Clippers team, as Lawrence Frank has said, they got to take chances on some fallen angels. That's what he has said before. So whether or not you like these type of moves, you can see the logic in them. And KPJ, I'm hoping, I'll read this quote again from Joey Lynn. Has made strides, has turned his life around in different ways. Again, Joey Lynn talked with him at Into a Dome at Media Day. When discussing counseling, what he's learned during his time away from the league and his journey back to the NBA, KPJ said, quote, "For me, I always believed in myself. I know my truth. I felt like I had a good fight getting back. Definitely didn't count myself out." We will see how this materializes, but the talent is obviously there on the court. And the Clippers, they're going to need help this season. And if he commits defensively to what I think he's capable of, I put up a defensive highlight reel of him on X at Follow Adam A. I think he could be much better on that end than people realize. I do. I think Kevin Porter Jr. is not just an offensive talent who has shades of being a dime store. No disrespect, but a poor man's James Harden. James Harden is a top 75 player ever. It's no disrespect to say that about a guy. It's a compliment still. But a lefty that can run an offense, to what degree, to how proficient he can be, we don't know. He hasn't been on a good team before. He hasn't been on a team with playoff aspirations before. But you can make the argument on the other side, because he was one of the focal points, if not the main guy on that Houston team, team's game plan to stop him. So what happens when he's playing off of James Harden, when he's playing off of Kawhi Leonard? What happens then? I don't know. I think there is a lot of untapped potential, clearly. And we can continue to talk about KPJ now, because the way they're talking about him leads me to believe he's going to get a real shot at making an impact this season. AM Production says, what will Harden's stats look like this year? He's got him at 25 plus, 10 plus assists, question mark. Here's what I'll say they need to be. Bare minimum. 20 points per game, 8.5 assists per game. So, what does that mean? How much of an increase is that from last season? I'll tell you exactly. He was at 16.5 points per game last season and 8.5 assists per game. What we need from James Harden, what I know you're hoping from, bare minimum, is basically what he did his last year in Philly, where he could have been an all-star, led the league in assists. He averaged 21 and 10.7 assists per game. 21 points per game on the dot and 10.7 assists per game. Wasn't his career high. That came back when he finished second in MVP voting in the 2016-2017 season, I think, to Steph Curry. Or no, that was to Russell Westbrook with the triple doubles. But he averaged 11 assists per game that season. But he is a year removed, James Harden, from almost averaging 11 assists per game and 21 points. Now, Embiid missed games that season, but you could still say, you know, Embiid was there. He's feeding him. It was a good Philly team. Guys are hitting shots. The assists were up. James Harden, bare minimum, 20 and 9. I'll round up from 8.5 to 9. 20 and 9, bare minimum. Anything above that is gravy, assuming the efficiency doesn't fall off a cliff. Last season, while he only shot 43% from the floor, when 7 of his 11 attempts per game were three-pointers, and he shot 38% from three, that's fine. That efficiency was fine last season. Yeah, if he can get it up to 44% from the field and almost 39% from three, that would be big. But there are nights where Kawhi's not going to be there, maybe even opening night, and James Harden has to take shots, put up shots, and be a threat and keep the defense off balance with not only his passing, but his scoring. So they don't know how to play him. Are we playing the step back? Is he driving past guys and therefore makes the defense have to be in that predicament where is he going for the floater or is he going for the lob to Ivica Zubac? Because that's when James Harden was at his best. When he had a roller and Clint Capella, that you didn't know if that ball going up was going to be a floater from James Harden. And he's kind of shot away from that floater recently. Not game 4 when he closed that game out against Dallas last season in the playoffs. But overall, he has not taken as many floaters. It hasn't been as efficient from him. But when he was right, when he was at his best, MVP, James Harden, that is the guy that would keep a defense off balance with his playmaking and scoring. And the most obvious way to do that was with that little floater that could also turn into a lob. I see Grant Mona's in the chat. Hey, Grant, if you want to jump in here for a little bit, let me know. I will send you a link. I don't know what your availability is, but I saw Grant Mona there today at Media Day. He's one of my favorites. He's been doing great things. And as Grant Mona said here, and we've talked about it on this show, this Clippers Talk Live, a Media Day special edition, Grant Mona says, this team is hearing the noise. They're accepting it. Loved it. Some more questions here. Oh, Moneyball approach. I like it. Build a Paul George in the aggregate. That's how you make up for the loss of Jason Giambi. No one guy can do it. Multiple guys have to. Clips or Die says, Bleacher Report has the Clippers starting 5 of Harden, Mann, Derrick Jones Jr., Kawhi, and Zu ranked 20th. I can't wait for this team to surprise people. I definitely think that starting 5 is higher than 20th. Because outside of Harden, that is some elite defense there. That is a team that can get the job done and get a lot of stops and hopefully some easier points because of stops leading to transition points and runouts and advanced passes by the Clippers. That's something Coach Lue wants. That is something he has talked about just last week. They need to score and take advantage of teams in transition more than they have. They have to play faster. It's great that they have the top 2 isolation players in the game. Kawhi, most points per possession in isolation last season. James Harden, just below him. Kind of significantly below him, but still second. Kawhi first, James Harden second. But what you want is to not have to rely on that so much and get easier buckets. Part of that is just playing through Ivica Zubac more, in my opinion. I always say this, but there is an easier path to victories, and it's playing through Big Zu. So do that, but also with Derrick Jones Jr. and Terrence Mann, should they both be in the starting lineup, they can beat their man down the floor. Find them with long outlet passes, advanced passes over the top of the defense, that mortar fire pass where you catch them doing a little bit of cherry picking. That's how you do it. Amina Sean said, you're right, Adam. We're a very jump shot heavy team. We need to get easier baskets. They know it. They're trying to figure this out. It's easy sometimes to have these goals and talking points during training camp, but it's kind of the old Mike Tyson saying, you know, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And the Clippers, unfortunately, have not held to some of their principles as the season has gone along. They've said some of this stuff the last couple of years, but it deteriorates as the season goes along. Some of it's just because of injuries, but the goal was to be a top 5 defense last season. They ended up 17th. They have to maintain their identity. That is the key. And they're saying all the right things, but you got to do them consistently. You have to be able to go out there. I thought I heard Grant Mona trying to get in here for a second, but now I don't see him. You got to go out there on a nightly basis and know how you want to play. Your game plan cannot waver based upon what the opposition is doing. Yes, there are times to make adjustments, but if you are imposing your will, if you're the aggressors, then you're winning a lot of ball games. That's what good teams do. Grant Mona is going to join us here shortly. I don't know if he's still at Into It Dome, but this should be fun. Give me in my voice a little bit of a break. JM1324 says, "What's up, Grant?" He'll be here in a second. Matthew Ajimi says, "Any update on finding PJ a place on another team?" Don't have that for you. Didn't see anything about that today. Evil Bot Adam says, "You think Kawhi is playing opening game like he said?" He didn't say that. He said he wants to play. Doesn't mean he's going to be able to play. It's a day-to-day thing. His plans to play opening night, but it still depends on his body. His right knee is dictating things. If it's up to Kawhi, I mean, in his head, of course he wants to play. He's a competitor. But he's at the mercy of how his right knee responds to everything right now. Amina Sean says, "Hopefully we can reach our goals this season, such as being a good transition defensive team." That's another thing they're stressing. And a good rebounding team as well. Good points. Another thing they brought up, they haven't been a good rebounding team. Some of it's because they're undersized and Kawhi playing the 4. But if guys don't step up with their rebounding this season, if you don't win the possession battle more often, this Clippers team is going to be in trouble because you can play great defense, but if you don't close out a possession and get the board, it doesn't matter. You can't give up more opportunities, as we now have the opportunity to talk with Grant Mona from the Sporting Tribune. Grant, I hope you can hear me, and I hope I can hear you. Talk to me. What do we got?
Testing 1, 2, 3. I want to make sure this works. Look at that. It works, Adam.
Are you
the microphone works.
Are you still in the building?
I am. Yeah, I'm actually in the red lounge. Listen, it was a maze here this morning. This is our first time doing this, so everyone was kind of like, "Hey, where do I put my stuff?" So yeah, I'm in the red lounge here where they had a whole bunch of food set up for us, which is, by the way, excellent stuff. I mean,
can you swing the camera around? Can we get the 360 view so everybody gets their shot of the Intuit Dome and what they can expect?
So this is the red lounge, guys. This is like where all the really luxury, nice, rich people come to watch the Clippers. But yeah, that's where they have the media set up right now. We got a whole bunch of legends in the building right now. But
you're one of them.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I tried to get out as much content as I possibly could, guys. Trust me, it was going rapidly. This is my first time again, so I was trying. But
Can
Adam,
I ask
really
you something?
Good to see you. Yeah.
Because I was there, we saw each other, we connected,
yeah.
And I left after Kawhi spoke and Ivica Zubac was going up there. I was having trouble hearing the sound from the microphone through the speakers. Was it low to you?
Yes, the mic's cut off here and there. So sometimes, like, Kawhi was speaking and you were there, like Kawhi was speaking and then the mic would cut off and he'd have to raise his voice, which I know that he doesn't like to do, but he had to raise his voice a little bit. Then it went back on and he was too loud. And then, so they had some technical difficulties. Like I said, first year of this, so they got to get this figured out. But yeah, it wasn't just you. It was all of us.
We'll give him a pass for that. It was still beautiful to see the Intuit Dome. Any day being at the Intuit Dome is a good day, whether the Clippers are playing or not. It is a sight to behold. It feels like a basketball theme park. It is so damn cool. Clipper Nation, I can't wait for all you guys here in the chat to experience it. Keep the questions coming. We got Grant Mona now. Grant, I'm going to throw one at you right away. Natural Haunt said this: could Dunn potentially start alongside Harden to maintain the defensive identity? Right?
Listen, I think that's a big possibility here. I think that, from what I've heard from a lot of the players, Terrence Mann, Norm Powell, Derrick Jones Jr., I had the opportunity to ask a question about. They all seem like this is an open kind of conversation about the lineup, and I really love that. I think that it's going to bring a lot of competition here. So I personally love Chris Dunn. I think Chris Dunn is one of the best perimeter guard defenders in the NBA, and he was with the Jazz for a couple years. And I remember he was in the Clippers system too, and they just never brought him up from the G League. But this is a guy that I think can be one of the better defenders at the guard position in the NBA. If you really want to go all in on defense, and from what I heard from everybody around the team, this whole media day was like, we have a defensive identity, we brought in defensive players, all this is about defense. If that's really what they're going for, then maybe you could see Chris Dunn slot in next to James Harden in that backcourt. Because, listen, we know that James Harden he got better, I feel like, last year on the defensive end with his swipes and staying in front of people. But again, he's not labeled as a good defender. So if you can pair him with a guy that is a good defender, and I know that Chris Dunn isn't that great offensively, but he's really good defensively, It may cause some spacing issues. That's one of my concerns. Like maybe that could be an issue, but I think that it would be pretty cool to have a James Harden, Chris Dunn, Kawhi Leonard, Derek Jones Jr., and Ivica Zubac starting five at some point. Again, I think this is fluid, so it's not really a set in stone thing with the starting five. I mean, Adam, you were there. Norm Powell said that he wants to start at the two as well. So there's a lot of different people, a lot of different quotes here. I guess we're just going to have to see as training camp unfolds.
Tell me more about DJJ because I wasn't there for his presser. You're saying he conveyed, just like other guys, that it's an open competition basically for not just the 2 spot, but the 3 spot, because that's what we heard last week from Coach Lue, where while the incumbent is Terrence Mann and he just got paid, and congratulations to T-Man, there are not just a spot open because of Paul George's absence, but there's one that is up for grabs because even though Terrence Mann started 71 games and may be the favorite, other guys are competing for it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, the availability for Derek Jones Jr. was kind of underrated. I feel like he's one of the guys that I wanted to hear from the most because he was in all sense. I mean, he was basically their top offseason signing. I know you re-signed guys, you extended guys, but Derek Jones Jr. was the guy that they brought in to kind of anchor that defense on the wing position. And I asked him a question. I said, are you going to be this high-flying guy? Have you talked with James Harden about being this high-flying athletic presence? Because the Clippers really haven't had that in years past. And he said, I haven't really talked about it, but I think that's just given. That was this kind of thing. It was just given that I'm going to do that stuff. But in terms of what he said on the defensive end, Adam, he said, I want to guard the best player. I talked to Ty, said, Ty, put me on the best player. And those 2 sentences right there, I was typing them out. I was like, this is exactly what I wanted to hear from Derek Jones Jr. Because if he's saying those things, that takes the burden off Kawhi trying to guard the best player. That takes the burden off of, I don't know, maybe Chris Dunn or Terrence Mann trying to guard the best player. If Derek Jones Jr. is up to that task and that's his mentality coming into this year for the Clippers, that everyone should be pretty excited about that. I think that's one of the things that we know about his offense. We know that he can shoot the 3 at times, and he's not a 40+% 3-point shooter. But if his defensive mindset is that, paired with JVG, paired with Nico Batum, and all the guys that they brought in, that was really an awesome quote for me. And I think Clipper fans are going to be really excited about him.
Grant Mona is our guest here on the Clippers Talk Live. He's still at Intuit Dome. I'm back home. Follow him at GMona48 on X. He covers the Clippers for the Sporting Tribune. David R. says, if you start Dunn, why start DJJ? For more defense, to lean into that defensive identity. I don't think Dunn and Terrence Mann are polar opposites of players. There is a lot of crossover between those two. And to be honest, as good as Terrence Mann is defensively, Chris Dunn is at another level when it comes to point of attack defense, Grant.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people, he was tucked away in Utah. He played for the Jazz, and a lot of people are like, okay, who's this guy that they're saying is going to replace Westbrook as the backup point guard? Go watch him
cook the Clippers in preseason last year.
Guys, I promise you and I've been watching this too. I've been watching a lot of his film. There is a clip on, I believe it's YouTube, of his highlights, and the Utah Jazz put up this great montage of his highlights, not just his offense, but his defense as well. And he was locking up guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was locking up guys, some of the top guards in the West, Jamal Murray. And that is what the Clippers have lacked in years past. Now, look, this is no disrespect to Russell Westbrook. I think at times Russell Westbrook could have been that defender, but every game you're going to get defensive intensity from Chris Dunn at the guard position. And he is not afraid of guarding some of the best players in the NBA. And he was guarding up, like he was guarding 3s and 4s at times for the Utah Jazz. So I hope everyone that's watching this goes and watches the YouTube video clip of Chris Dunn, all of them, because he is an awesome, awesome defensive player. And his offensive game has gotten a little bit better too. So I think that, like you mentioned, they're 2 different players, him and Derek Jones Jr., but in general, I think that if you put both of those guys in a lineup, even if you put Nico Batum at the small ball 5, I mean, that's very versatile defensively. You can switch 1 through 5, I feel like, and man, that could be a cool lineup to see.
He's a different player than Derek Jones Jr. He's a different player than Terrence Mann, who he could be competing for minutes with or competing for the starting 2-guard slot, because he's a defensive specialist when it comes to point of attack. He is a Patrick Beverley type of pest. And Terrence Mann is very good in that area. I thought the defense he played against Luka Doncic was probably the best defense he's ever played, considering it was the playoffs and he peaked at just the right time. But you mentioned the three-point shooting from Chris Dunn. What's interesting is, well, he only played 22 games for the Jazz during the 22-23 season. So the volume's low, but if you go out after go off of his last 150 takes from the outside from three over the last season and 22 games he played with the Utah Jazz, we're talking about somebody that shot like 41% from three. Now, it's not a huge sample size, and it's one season where he's playing 22 games. Combine that with the 66 games he played last season for the Utah Jazz, but he's capable. He's capable of knocking down catch and shoot threes. Something that I found interesting earlier, we were talking a lot about Kevin Porter Jr. after what Coach Lou said last week, Grant, regarding him and how if the team is going to have success, he's going to have to make a big impact. Well, I just looked up his catch and shoot numbers from his last two seasons, 48% and 43% on catch and shoots threes. That is a revelation to me. A guy shooting almost 50% for a season during the 21-22 season, Kevin Porter Jr. from three. How much, and I don't know if you talked to him, I saw he was near courtside at Intuit Dome, but how much of an impact are you expecting from him now?
Well, listen, what Ty Lue said a few weeks ago or last week at the presser, but that he and Lawrence Frank held, it seems like they hold him in a high regard, right? They hold Kevin Porter Jr. as this guy that can make an immediate impact. And I feel like a lot of the sentiment around Kevin Porter Jr. is the off-the-court stuff, and that's rightfully so. I mean, there are some off-the-court issues that he has to work through. You've been very adamant about mentioning this as like, hey, we don't even know if he'll be on the court for some time because there's still an ongoing investigation regarding it. But from everything that I've heard from him on the court and what I've seen from him on the court, I mean, I've known his game for a long time since he came into the league, and even overseas. I watched some of his overseas highlights. Adam, you mentioned like the 48% catch and shoot. That is up there like near Norm Powell status. And we know how good Norm Powell was at catch and shoots last year, how good he was in the corners last year. So you can get that with Kevin Porter Jr., who's a long guy. You mentioned you put up his defensive kind of highlight clip and how he can enter passing lanes and all that stuff. If you can get maybe just like an average Kevin Porter Jr. on defense, but that type of offensive output, I mean, this is a guy that knows how to score the basketball. It has never been about his on-the-court ability. It's always been about his off-the-court stuff. So if they can get that intact, and from all the quotes that I've seen, and he actually was interviewed by a few people. Law Murray has some stuff on X. Justin Rousseau has some stuff on X. They were there talking to him and asking him questions. He really seems to be humbled by his whole experience off the court. He really seems to want to be a better person. He's going through counseling and stuff like that and therapy and stuff like that. So if his mind is right and if the team thinks that he can be a really good part of this team, there is no reason why he won't be a big part of this team offensively. I mean, even defensively with his length.
You mentioned Norman Powell there and talking about extreme efficiency on catch and shoot threes. And he had a quote, and I'm wondering how much you thought this was a shot at Paul George or not. But Norman Powell said regarding losing Paul George, quote, "I saw it as addition by subtraction, more guys getting opportunities, including myself." Is there a little bit of smoke there, Grant?
I think there is, Adam. There were some quotes today, and Kawhi mentioned one. And, Kawhi's not the type of guy to go at people. He's just kind of like an individual guy where he keeps to himself. He tries to work hard and does all this stuff. But when Norm Powell said that, there was like a gasp in the room almost. I was looking around to the other media members, and they were like, ooh, do you guys hear that? Am I hearing the right thing?
I'm going to be honest. I asked Brian Seaman, who's directly on my right, did he just say that about Paul George?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people were like, did he mean it that way? Because it came off like he didn't obviously mean it in a derogatory way. But the way it came off, it was like, hey, I think this is going to open up more opportunities, not just for myself, but for the players that were behind Paul George or didn't get playing time because of Paul George. And he's right in that regard. Like, you're going to see more opportunities for guys because you don't have those four superstars on the court at the same time or in the rotation at the same time. So I think that, what he meant by it was like, hey, we're losing that type of player, and yes, that's going to hurt, but it may be addition by subtraction because it allows the development of other guys, or it allows guys to blossom in that way. So it was a little bit weird. And I remember Kawhi said something like,
I got it. I got
I
the
don't,
quote.
yeah,
This
he said,
Kawhi said, for anybody on the court, I don't look at him to be my savior.
yes.
Basically, he was talking about the mindset if it changes with Paul George gone. And Kawhi said, quote, he obviously made things easier on the court for players. But as far as my mental focus going into a game, I don't think it's going to be harder for anybody on the court. I don't look at him to be my savior. I agree with you, though, Grant. I don't think either were necessarily pointed at Kawhi. It's just we're confident still. And in terms of Norm Powell, he's been looking for this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think Norm Powell's the kind of guy that always just kind of lives with an edge. Kawhi the same way. You don't really need to throw any extra motivation at him. And Norm Powell's a guy that grinds as hard as anybody in the NBA. He works on his game as hard as anybody in the NBA. Kawhi the same way. So I think that, whenever we talk about, what do they think about Paul George? I think these guys are just level-headed enough to say like, hey, he left. It's a business decision. It's the NBA, and we're going to get better from this. So I think that was the sentiment as well around the team, is like, hey, yes, we did lose Paul George. Like, we all get it. Hey, we should be the 12 seed. They kind of accepted that and were like, we want to work hard. We're going to be hungry and we're going to be dogs on the court. And that's something else that I really love that they said, is that, listen, we know the expectations for this team. We've heard the media noise. We hear what all the outlets are saying about how we won't even make the play-in, but we're accepting it, and we are hearing it, and we are going to work hard to not let that happen. And that is awesome to me. I love that they actually heard, because, Adam, you know this. Like, a lot of teams or a lot of players would come into these media days like, we don't listen to the outside noise. We don't do the, This team was like, hey, we did hear it, and we're going to try to not do what they said that we're going to do. So I love this mindset from the team. Terrence Mann came on right before Derrick Jones Jr., and he said himself, like, we got some dogs in there, and we're hungry to change that narrative. So I'm looking forward to that.
Who else spoke? Because I'm looking for Mo Bamba stuff. I don't know if any of the young guys, Jordan Miller, Cam Christie, Kobe Brown spoke. Was there anyone else, Grant?
No, they were just on the court taking pictures. Obviously, we got Amir Coffey was another guy that was down there on the court taking all of his photos. But the last guy to take media availability was Derrick Jones Jr. So after that, nobody actually spoke in front of a mic. Now, obviously, if you go to Law Murray's page and Justin Rousseau and a few other guys, you'll find some personal interviews that they did with those guys. I believe they interviewed Kevin Porter Jr., Amir Coffey, maybe Mo Bamba. I kind of left there before Mo actually came onto the court. So. But in terms of the actual microphone availability, Derrick Jones Jr. was the last one.
Let me ask you this, because we've been having this conversation. If Kawhi Leonard is not going to be available opening night, and nobody can know that because it all comes down to how his knee responds to the treatment and strengthening they're going to do during training camp over the next couple of weeks. But if he's not available, how do you think that changes the starting lineup with maybe not just one guy being out with Kawhi and replacing him maybe with Nicholas Batum, but I think it could upend the entire starting lineup, because then you're looking for more scoring. And therefore, maybe you can't start Chris Dunn or Terrence Mann next to James Harden. Then it has to be Norman Powell. What do you see as the ideal starting lineup, or just what's your read on the situation with Coach Lue if Kawhi is unavailable?
Yeah, I think that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is like, it depends on what kind of mindset and intensity you want to do. Like, do you want to be that defensive team? Okay, fine. Then you'll put out the best defensive lineup. But if Kawhi isn't in there to start opening night, you're probably absolutely going to see Norm Powell start at the 2. I think that, when you have a guy like Norm Powell, and he's an 18-point per game scorer at times, he can be a 20-point per game scorer, in my opinion, if he gets the volume to do it. But you put him in that lineup if Kawhi's out, and say you have like Harden, Norm, Derrick Jones Jr., Derrick Jones Jr., Batum, and Zubac. Like, I don't know. It's going to be kind of a juggle of, kind of what they want to do. But it seemed like to me like Kawhi was like, hey, I want to play opening night. I want to be, and again, he wants to do a lot of things. And I feel like the team is kind of saying, listen, we want you for the long run. But if Kawhi's out, I am almost certain that Norm Powell is going to slot into that too. And if that's the case, Adam, then what does the bench look like? Does Bones Highland get an opportunity at the backup point position? Then you have Chris Dunn at the 2 if you want to do that. So I don't know, it shuffles things around a little bit.
Did you see Bones Highland or PJ Tucker in the building anywhere?
No, very weird. I didn't see either. You know what? That's a good point. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah,
Wow.
the writing might be on the wall. Look,
Yeah.
it's not like Lawrence Frank hasn't made it known that they tried to trade them per the request
Sure.
last trade deadline, and then during this offseason, they just haven't gotten whatever they're looking for back. It takes two to tango here. Did anybody say anything about PJ Tucker? So we didn't hear from Coach Lou today. We didn't hear from
No.
Lawrence Frank today. What we heard from them happened last week. So basically, we can take that out from media day. But we didn't even hear a guy mention PJ Tucker, I don't think, right?
No, nobody mentioned PJ Tucker. Nobody mentioned Bones Highland. Everyone kind of mentioned, like, hey, we love the new guys coming in. But, there was really no talk of those two guys, which is something that, like, I think it just slipped my mind because I was so focused on what was going on. But you bring up a good point. Those guys weren't even here. Like, I could understand if they're here and they take the pictures and they don't do media availability, but they just weren't here in general, which I don't know what's going on there.
I want to say they had Marcus Morris to start last season, and he also wasn't at media day because it felt like he was going to be traded, just not to put them through that because they knew they were on the chopping block. And I think they both want an opportunity somewhere else. I think the feeling might be mutual at this point. I don't know, but it would have been interesting to hear from Coach Lou regarding them if they are going to be at training camp. Are they competing for a spot? And as you mentioned, if there's going to be an opportunity for them, if Kawhi's not playing, what does that mean for the 4 spot? What does that mean for Bones Highland fighting with all these guards now? Yeah, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and maybe the silence speaks volumes to some degree because they're not here and saying anything. That means it's pretty definitive at this point that they are looking to move them if there's a real trade out there. I don't know if there's going to be, honestly.
I don't know.
PJ Tucker making $11 million per season. I could see a trade package because somebody might want Bones Highlands. Somebody does want Bones Highland. There's no doubt about that to me. But yeah, Holo Dolo says, wow, I totally forgot about PJ and Bones being there. It just seems like they've moved on. They're not in the short-term or long-term plan for the Clippers anymore. This team and what we heard today and some of the themes coming out of this now, Grant, with having that competitive spirit and hearing the outside noise and nailing up some of that stuff in those reports on the bulletin board for extra motivation, I like hearing that. We heard more about the defensive identity. There was something else with Kawhi Leonard, and I'm not sure who asked the question. I think it was Young Masuk. He asked him specifically whether or not this could be an ongoing issue with his knee. I want to know if you can give me a little bit of feedback on that because, again, my hearing wasn't great, and I haven't seen that exact quote, but it didn't seem like Kawhi shied away from that one, although he asked him maybe to repeat it once.
Yeah, it was Ohm. Ohm asked the question, like, with this inflammation, is it something that you can manage, or is this something that you're just going to have to deal with for the rest of your career? And I can't remember Kawhi's exact quotes, but he said something to the fact like, yeah, I think it is. We're just going to have to manage it because I haven't been able to finish playoff runs. That's something that Kawhi mentioned multiple times. Is like, I haven't been able to finish playoff runs, and I think that is really getting to him. I think that's something that he lives for the playoffs. We know how good of a playoff performer he is, and I know that it doesn't show it in his emotions, but it is eating at him that he can't be able to be out. He wasn't able to be out there for the last playoff run. So, listen, I don't know exactly how Kawhi wants to approach this. I don't know how the Clippers want to approach this, but from whatever I'm gathering, and even James Harden said something that I don't think a lot of people are responding with or are talking about, is that James Harden said, listen, Kawhi hasn't been there. He hasn't been there in the past playoff runs, and like we want him at the end. We don't really care about him being there to begin. And I was thinking, I was like, that's not really something that I'd love to hear from your co-star, right? Is like, he may, it's kind of saying like, hey, he may not be there to begin the season, and he may not be his full self at the beginning of the season, but down the line is when we really need him. So
I wondered about that too. I kind of heard that the same way, where a red flag went up. But he also said basically he'll be ready when he's ready. We want him to be healthy. Sure. He said all the right things there. And it also, I guess, had my antenna going up because they can't get by and get to the playoffs. I don't think if Kawhi, they can't just rest him till March. they aren't good enough to stay above water and to stay in the playoff hunt to me, Grant, this time around if Kawhi is out for a significant portion of the season.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think that's the sentiment right now. That's what everyone should be talking about is that listen, you can say what you want about like sitting Kawhi, resting Kawhi, making sure that he's ready for the playoffs, but the Clippers aren't going to make the playoffs if Kawhi isn't playing 56, at least 50 games. I say 50, that's like a lot missed, but like at least 60 games, in my opinion, because the West is that much tougher. The team doesn't have another 20-point per game scorer on the roster unless you think that Norm Powell is going to elevate to that. So I think that, Harden is one of those guys where I think he's just like Kawhi and Norm, where it's like, hey, I'm trying to do my thing, and obviously I'm for the team, but like I don't want to hear the outside noise. I don't really care about it. But the fact that he mentioned Kawhi and that he mentioned about how he wants him to be there at the end of the season this year, and that they don't really care about how he is at the beginning of the season, it kind of reminds me a little bit about that. When Kawhi came back from that torn ACL, and everyone's like, it's going to take him some time. I remember Nico Batum that year. He said, give us until Christmas. And then from Christmas on, that's when we'll be a right team. Obviously, they were never together as a team, even after Christmas. But I feel like that's the kind of vibe we're feeling from this Clippers team. It reminds me, and unfortunately, it reminds me a lot of what happened when Kawhi came back. I think that was the 22-23 year, where it was up and down. The Clippers finished as the 5 seed. They played the Suns. I mean, everyone was down that year. That was a down year for the West in general. But I feel like that's kind of where we're at right now with this Kawhi situation. I hope it's better. I hope the outcome is a lot better. But even from the players, when what they're saying, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
That quote we mentioned starting this conversation about Kawhi Leonard here from Young Masuk was, and he's paraphrasing, I think, a little bit, but this is accurate. He said, Kawhi Leonard says the inflammation in his knee is something that he could have to deal with for the rest of his career. But he says he and medical staff have a handle on it and are doing what is needed to keep it from being something that will be an issue down the road. That is concerning to me, and it goes back to this. Is the swelling down because he's not playing high-level basketball yet? And once he does, it could rise back up or flare up, or the inflammation will reset. That's always been my concern. That's what it was in the playoff series when they thought they had it more under control. He looked decent in game 2 overall, considering he hadn't played basketball in like a month. But then in game 3, after the swelling went up after playing in game 2, he looked like a shadow of himself or a fraction of himself. It was really concerning, and that's what worries me. Sore Losers Gaming says, we have no choice. Let's just load manage and pray he's okay for the playoffs and just be more cautious than previous years if possible. Here's the problem. For the playoffs, are you going to be able to get by, as Jim Moore would say, if you don't have him enough during the regular season? To what Grant's saying, I think they need him at least 50 games to be in the playoff picture. Like, you could flirt with being outside of the play-in if you don't have Kawhi Leonard enough this season. When you look at teams in the Western Conference, Grant, that are getting better, the Spurs are going to be better. The Houston Rockets are going to be better. The Golden State Warriors might be about the same. The Lakers could be better. The Pelicans could be better. Most teams are getting better. While there's a couple contenders that you could say got a little bit worse. People are saying Denver got a little bit worse. People are saying Minnesota got a little bit worse. OKC did not get worse. But for the most part, I mean, maybe Dallas got slightly worse. They lost DJJ. For the most part, some of the young teams are on the rise. Outside of Portland and Utah, how many teams do you think the Clippers are clear-cut above in the Western Conference right now?
I mean, clear cut is one thing. I know that they're better, like, balance-wise than other teams because they have 2 stars. Like, the Spurs have Victor Wembanyama, but they don't really have another star. I mean, I guess you could say Devin Vassell or somebody like that. They brought in Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, but the Clippers at least are banking on their 2 stars being that good, like getting back to their prime version. I mean, I know Kawhi is already the prime version of himself. He just had an insane year, but they're banking on James Harden getting back to his Houston days. So I can't really say like clear cut because the Clippers, I feel like, if everything goes well, they will be a middle of the pack team. They aren't going to be a top 4 team, in my opinion, because of the ascension of OKC, because of Minnesota, and I don't know what Minnesota is going to look like now because they traded away Karl Anthony Towns and got Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. So we're going to have to see about them. That's another question mark. New Orleans added DeJounte Murray. The Dallas Mavericks added Klay Thompson. We'll see what kind of version of Klay Thompson we get. We'll see what Najee Marshall brings to that team. He's kind of like the Derrick Jones Jr. replacement. Denver, I feel like, got worse. They lost KCP. Yes, they added Russell Westbrook, but that fit remains to be seen. While we do say that the West got better, Adam, and we said this probably about 2023 as well, there still are a lot of question marks, right? And I think we've talked about this before. Like, we just saw a Dallas Mavericks team that a lot of people didn't really feel like were going to go to the finals this past year. They made a couple trades at the deadline, and they leaned on their guys, and they made it to the finals as a 5 seed. Okay, so yes, in theory, we do say that the West is better. And yes, on paper, it is better. It's going to be deep. It's a deep conference, but the East is as well. I feel like if you go into the season and say it's February, right, and this team is kind of in the middle of the pack like we all believe, are they going to make that trade for somebody? Or are they just going to stand put and say, hey, our focus is on the 2026, 2027 free agency. Let's not make a move. I feel like right now, Adam, they are better than a lot of teams that I feel like people are putting up there. I feel like they're better than the Lakers. I feel like the Clippers are a little bit better than the Lakers. I feel like the Clippers are better than the Warriors. The Kings, I love what they did with DeMar DeRozan, but again, it's not clear cut. That was your first question. It's not really a clear better. So it's going to be tough.
If they have Kawhi.
Right.
And I'm
banking on that. Yeah.
And we're already talking about uncertainty with game 1 to start this season. They don't know if he's going to be available. I guess my point is, outside of 3 teams, with Portland, with Utah, with San Antonio, I don't think there's enough clear separation between the Clippers and anybody else. Now, if you tell me Kawhi's good for 60 games and James Harden's good for 65 plus, then okay. Then maybe they have a shot at the 6th spot. But right now, it's really hard to say that with any amount of certainty that Kawhi is going to be okay for that many games. Amin Hassan has said, we've tried everything to keep Kawhi healthy. Best bet is to have Kawhi play 57 or 63 games, just throwing out random numbers here. Like, I have no idea. How's his knee going to respond to any of this stuff? Jonathan Ing has a question that I think is pretty good. Luka's style was mentioned by Harden, and to avoid overextending and overuse given his age, how is the ball handling and supplementary playmaking from the bench going to look, Grant, in your opinion, so Harden isn't overtaxed?
Yeah, I think that, I was kind of banking on Bones Highland kind of being that guy because he is a great offensive player, but he's not, I guess, a part of the team anymore. So we'll have to see about that. Norm Powell he's mentioned things about ball handling and pick and roll and playmaking.
That was big to me, actually. Him saying the thing he worked on most was playmaking and pick and roll. And that is something he has to do.
Right, and we've talked about this, and I've heard you talk about it on the show, is like that is something that he doesn't bring. He's just offensive. He's just an offensive scorer. So the fact that he actually mentioned that and being able to play off ball and being, malleable in his offensive output, I think that's something that I think really stood out to me, is that he was willing to work on his playmaking. He was willing to work on his pick and roll. And maybe, to Jonathan's question, like maybe the front office or maybe Coach Lue approached him and like, hey, I know that you've been a scorer for us in the past and we've had the 4 stars and you played excellent around those guys, but we're going to kind of need you to be that guy that you were on the Raptors, where it was a 2-way player. You were great on defense, you could handle the ball a little bit, and you were still a great scorer. So maybe that's what they're banking on, is Norm Powell kind of being that guy off the bench where he can be the guy that can ball handle and be a supplementary playmaker like Jonathan's asking. So again, Chris Dunn is not the guy that is going to be an excellent floor general. He's not that kind of guy. He can handle the basketball. He can score sometimes, but he's not that type of player. So I think that it's going to be a little bit of a process, right? It's going to be like, hey, let's just try Chris Dunn out at the backup point. Let's see if that works. Maybe they try Norm Powell at the backup point if he doesn't get that starting 2 spot. I don't know. So at this point, look, everyone always clowns me because I mentioned that the Clippers are signing another guard. Like they signed Trenton Flowers and they got all these different guards. But the fact that they have guards and they can be a little bit dynamic with that, I think that's a good thing, right? And maybe Kevin Porter Jr. assumes that role. We don't know if everything clears with him and he's the guy that we think he can be. Maybe he's the guy behind Harden that can kind of be that supplemental offensive piece. So again, Jonathan, I don't really have a clear-cut answer for you, but there are options. The Clippers have the options to do that.
I like the way you put that at the end. There are options. It could be backup point guard by committee. Terrence Mann could play some backup point guard. Chris Dunn has had a couple seasons where he's averaged 5 assists. Like, I think he's capable. I think he, Mann, and KPJ are all more capable than Norman Powell at this point. Norm just hasn't shown off a high proficiency when it comes to passing. He hasn't. If he's worked on it, if it's better now because of this offseason and the training he's done, I'd love to see it. Because if Norm could add that extra element with his scoring, now you're talking. You mentioned him with the Toronto Raptors and the defense he used to be able to play. If you add a couple different elements with him being a better playmaker now and a better defender, then you have someone who's much more valuable to this team, and it would help his own cause with getting minutes if he's not so deficient in these other areas and he's just being a one-dimensional scorer out there. That's no disrespect. I don't want to make the Chris Carter, he only scores touchdowns type of mistake. It is very important what Norman Powell does, but he does have weaknesses that keep him from being on the court enough in a season where you no longer have Paul George and you have a guy who's a bucket, but if he can't play make it, if he can't be a connector, if he can't be a great defender out there and he's a liability or a negative defender, then he can't play as much. And he's jockeying for position with other guys that do some of those other elements better than he does right now. But that could be big. Amin Ashan said this: Norman Powell is more of a catch and shoot attacking closeouts players. Yes, agree. He can create, but he excels off of attacking closeouts and catch and shoots. He can create is kind. Norman Powell has been a bit of an adventure, you could say, when he's trying to create for others. That's just not what he does well. He scores, and like you said, he's a decisive scorer, and he takes the right shots. He's an analytics, Daryl Morey type of dream because everything's at the basket or a catch-and-shoot three. But I think for the Clippers to have success this season, Norm is going to have to expand his game in the ways he talked about today, Grant.
Yeah, and I think this point about Norm Powell, and I think we want him to be a lot more because, he's away from that 4-star kind of look. And, at this point, if he does become the guy that we know that he probably can be with his talent, I mean, he works so hard. I think if he works harder on his playmaking and his pick and roll game, he can blossom into that kind of player. And he's not an older player, and he's like 29, 30 years old, so he's not entirely young, but he still has room to grow as a player, in my opinion. There's been plenty of players that have kind of transformed their game as their careers have gone on to manipulate themselves into being a team player, right? So I think for Norm, every comment that I've seen from the past couple media days is like, hey, I want to be an all-star this year. Hey, I want to be like a starter this year. And everyone, like Clipper Nation, was like, kind of temper your expectations because that's not really who you are. This year, if Norm Powell wants to have that kind of mindset, I'm all for it because we're going to need as much offensive output as possible. But, I think that, Amin is right, and you're right, Adam. Like, the catch and shoot guy, yeah, that's what he is. He attacks closeout players. He's not the guy that's going to slide his feet and stay in front of a guy and hound them on the defensive end. And his creation, I'm glad that he mentioned that he's getting better at that. But I think and here's the other thing, Adam, if he does go to that starting 2 spot next to James Harden, does that kind of hinder his offensive ability? Because I feel like if he's on the bench, he has more of a free will to kind of be Norm and be a guy that can blossom. So that's something that just popped into my head. Like, yes, he could be great around the guys, like around Harden, around Kawhi in the starting lineup, but we probably won't see the full Norman Powell experience unless he's on the bench and unless he's playing with that bench unit as the main scorer on the bench unit. So that's a little bit of a concern too, or a question, I guess.
No, that's true. He'd be playing much more off ball and wouldn't be as
like
much
last
of
year.
A focal point if he's in the starting lineup. He's dangerous there off ball, but he has more of a green light if the offense is more centered around him with the second unit. Let's talk a little bit about somebody else I want to see more of a focal point from with this Clippers team this season, and that's Ivica Zubac. What did you hear from him today, Grant, that leads you to be a little bit more encouraged that not only has he gotten paid, and that should encourage him to have a bigger role on this team, but just with what he said today at Media Day to back that up.
Yeah, everyone asks Zoo about his offensive volume, his offensive output, and Zoo is kind of a low key guy, so he doesn't really like to talk himself up that much. But when they asked him that, he said, I've been working on my left and right hooks, and I believe that either Law or Tomer asked him. I think Tomer asked him, "Hey, are you going to be quicker going with your back to the basket?" Because that's a lot of people's concern. Is like when you get it to Zoo, it's going to take him 4 or 5 seconds to get into his offense and do his thing. So is that something that you've been working on, maybe in the Olympics with Croatia? And Zoo was like, not really, because I have to read the defenses and I have to kind of see what the defense is giving me and what it's not. So I didn't really work on it, but that is something that I want to key in on. That's something kind of that he wanted to focus on. Another big thing that I heard from Zoo was like, I think somebody asked him like your experience with Croatia and the Olympics and the ability to, play as kind of the main guy for Croatia. And he said, look, I played with Croatia and they expected me to have a higher offensive volume. And so it's not like it's new to me. I'm used to being like a higher offensive volume guy, a guy that they rely on more. So it's not really something that I have to work on. Because when I go over to Croatia and when I play with the national team, that's what they expect of me anyways. So coming back here and signing the extension and everyone's like, hey, you're the third option now. It's like he kind of basically said like, it's not really that new to me because I do it in my international team. So that is a really good sign because that means that he doesn't really have to work on a lot because he's already kind of familiar with that more, I guess, attention on him. So I think Zoo understands, like he understands that they lost a 20-point per game scorer in Paul George. They lost that kind of offensive output, and he knows that he's going to have to step it up. But I think that he also talked about his defensive ability, the ability to play on the perimeter and be more laterally quick and be that rim protector that the Clippers love and that they need, honestly. And Amin's right. Like, Zoo needs to probably average 15 or 16 points per game in order for them to be a very good team this year. So, again, I think I loved what I heard from Zoo, but I think I would love to hear a little bit more about how he can expand his game. I think Law, joked with him, hey, are we going to see you shoot any threes this year? And he said, I don't really want to answer that. And Law said, come on, just give me an answer. And Zoo said, yeah, I'll shoot the threes for you, man. So I'm not going to say that he's going to do it, but it was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of answer.
Stretch Zoo is a bucket. We saw it a couple years ago when he got one attempt off, I think, in the 2021 season against the Houston Rockets, the last game of the year, and then they took him out of the ball game after he made it, too. That's interesting to me. I agree with Amin Ashan here saying he feels like Ivica Zubac needs to average 15 or 16 points per game. To me, Grant, you give me your numbers, but I'm going with 16 and 11. If Zoo is anywhere in that range to me, the Clippers are staying afloat in the Western Conference.
My number, Adam, was 15 and 10, and that's kind of like a baseline, I guess, number stat line. I think all of us that are expecting a lot from Zoo are kind of expecting that kind of stat line. 16-11 is very fair. I feel like if he gets more touches, if he's more involved in the offense, and he said himself, him and James Harden have been working very hard, and they, having a full off season together, and it seems like they've gotten together. I mean, James Harden mentioned this, they've already had some time together to kind of mesh in the off season. They've gotten together in Arizona, and the team has gotten together on bonding trips, and they've worked on things already, which is a cool sign. So, Zoo mentioned his chemistry with James Harden. He wants to take that next step, and he feels like that next step is there. So if you have a Zoo and Harden pick and roll game that is even better than it was last year, because last year was so good, then that means a lot, not just for James Harden, but for Zoo as well. If he can get more points in that pick and roll situation, he has the ability to pass out of that pick and roll as well. So maybe we see his assist numbers go up. I'm not really sure, Adam, but I think the scoring output, he understands it. And the fact that he's willing to kind of manipulate his game, he's willing to work on his game in other areas with the left hook, the right hook, maybe farther from the basket. I think that's really good. And the 15 and 10, again, that's baseline. I feel like that should be what he's shooting for, but 16-11 I think would be a blessing for this team. I think that would mean that the Clippers are in the mix, in my opinion.
And it means they're no longer forgetting about Ivica Zubac. Exploit Ivica Zubac in a good way. Use him. He can help this team get easier buckets, which they've had a tough time generating over the years. They've been much of a jump shooting team. Evil Bot Adam, asks, you think it's going to affect them in some level with the chemistry on practice time, not knowing from the start who's going to be the starter at shooting guard? Do you think that's a problem in training camp?
I don't think so. I think that whenever you have competition for these spots, it betters the team. I remember, Adam, in 2021, this was before the conference finals run, they brought in Nico Batum, and everyone was like, who's going to start at the 4, Marcus Morris or Nico Batum? It's going to be an open competition for that 4 spot. And, Nico Batum said, listen, I don't care. I just want to help the team. Marcus Morris said, I want to be the starter. He was basically saying, like, I want to be the 4. And I believe Marcus Morris got hurt, and Nico Batum came in at that 4 spot. And it was a competition in training camp. Nico Batum started the season at the 4. When Marcus Morris came back, he didn't really play that well. He didn't really play that well, and Nico Batum was playing well. So Marcus Morris said, hey, you can take that 4 spot for now because we're doing so well. Batum started to slow down a little bit. Then he passed it on to Marcus Morris. He said, look, Marcus has gotten hot. He's probably the best fit for the starting lineup, and he allowed that to happen. So hopefully that's the case this year. Hopefully this open competition for all of these spots doesn't affect the chemistry. If anything, I think it'll help. I mean, from everything that I've seen from these guys and what they've been talking about, the chemistry is at a really high level right now, and they haven't even gotten to a practice yet. I know they've had their off-season stuff and they've gotten together there, but I don't think it's going to affect the chemistry in a negative way at all. I think that all of this talk about who's going to start at the 2, who's going to start at the 4, that's going to better the team because now you're going to say, look, there's going to be competition in training camp. In years past, it's been like, okay, here's our starting 5, and it's kind of what it is. Now it's like, hey, you're going to have to earn these spots, and I think that'll be better for the team chemistry-wise. I mean, all these guys have a dog kind of mentality, I guess you could say, and they all have that hunger, so that's going to better the chemistry, not negatively affect it, in my opinion.
I want to nip something in the bud here because I'm so sick of people saying this about Ivica Zubac. And if I stayed long enough to ask him this question, I might have done so today because there's this misconception about Ivica Zubac. Amin Ashan says, also, he needs that efficiency to be higher than last season. So, number 1, no one was better from 5 to 9 feet out in the league at the center position than Ivica Zubac. Not even Nikola Jokic. I think he ended up shooting 64% from 5 to 9 feet out. So there's false narrative number 1. Number 2, while also being a much better rim protector, nobody in the effing league was a better rim protector last season than Ivica Zubac. Teams only shot 51.9% in the restricted area against Ivica Zubac. Are you guys seeing this? Do you get it? Do you understand just how good he is on that end? Oh, he's also elite at defending the pick and roll. He was only second to Rudy Gobert there. Ivica Zubac, his entire tenure with the Clippers, has been top 5 in rim protection and multiple times has been the best at the season end when it comes to field goal percentage in the restricted area. Can we stop the false narrative about him? Please. My God, it is... I'm sorry. It is just mind-numbing.
It's so fair, though. I remember listening to Clippers talk for the radio last year, and people were coming on. They're like, "Well, we should put in Mason Plumlee to start over Zubac because he just doesn't know what he's doing out there." And I just couldn't believe what I was listening to because all of these stats, these aren't just random analytical stats. These are critical, essential things that teams look at when they're valuing their big men or when they're evaluating centers. And look at the names he's up there with. It's not just, look, Chet Holmgren, Kristaps Porzingis, Wembanyama. That guy was in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. And the fact that Ivica Zubac is near the top of that, I think Ivica Zubac is near the top guarding Nikola Jokic too, who is obviously the best center in the NBA. So I don't know where this narrative came from. I think it's just that Zoo isn't this flashy player. He's not this dynamic, unbelievable stretch 5 that you see from a lot of other teams. He gets the job done at a high clip, and that's why they extended him. I don't know why people don't understand that.
It is one of the most frustrating things that you have to deal with when it comes to Ivica Zubac. It is a false narrative perpetuated by people that have no idea about ball. And to your point, I don't want to call them casuals. I'll call them low-level information fans. To your point, this is something that every front office and every coaching staff looks at and evaluates rim protection. It is one of the most sought after things when it comes to a big man. A roller and a rim protector. That's what you look for in today's NBA. And to your point, and I know you got to leave here in a second, Grant, but nobody has been better defending Jokic in one-on-one plays in isolation than Ivica Zubac. In fact, it's by such a wide margin. It's incredible. If you're going off the last 5 seasons, including the playoffs, points per possession against Jokic is only getting 0.68 points per possession against Ivica Zubac one-on-one. The next closest guy, Jokic, is getting a point per possession against. So there's a 0.42 difference. It's incredible, his defense against Jokic. He doesn't get applauded for it enough. He's one of my favorite players. I feel passionately about it. If that's why I sound so intense right now, it's just one of those things. It's a crime against Ivica Zubac and the Clippers organization that value him so much to give him this new contract if you don't realize that he has been one of the top rim defenders and just was the top rim defender in the league this past season, and there's nobody better against Jokic. Grant,
Clip that. Somebody clip that. Put it on socials.
if that's what it takes, an unhinged rant for me. Grant, where can everybody find your wonderful work? And I know you're going to be posting a lot of stuff after today's media day.
Yeah, so I posted a bunch of stuff at gmona48 on X. That's where I'll be posting a lot of the quick updates, the video stuff. I'm also at Money Mo Media on YouTube. I'll be posting a lot of stuff there in terms of long form. Money Mo Media TV is my TikTok, where I post a lot of clips basically every day. And, I'll have all my written stuff at the Sporting Tribune, so thesportingtribune.com. We are all LA all the time, all SoCal all the time. So, Adam, again, it was a pleasure being here with you. It's good to see you today. And all this passion, I hope the Clippers have heard it. I hope that they are going to embrace it. And I hope that Ivica Zubac doesn't listen to any of these people, because he's the man, in my opinion.
There's an easier path to win ball games, and it's playing through Big Zoo.
Yes.
Grant, love you, bro. Good to see you. Good to bro hug you today. We will talk again soon. Again, guys, follow Grant Mona for all this good information from the Sporting Tribune. Please, if you listen to me, well, you're also listening to him already, because I take notes of things he says. So please, if you're going to respect me here, respect Grant Mona, because he has been a part of this show. I think it's the 3rd time he has come on in the last month. Grant, have a good one. Safe drive home. Get all that good content up for the people.
All right, Adam. Take care. I'll see you soon, man.
All right. The live stream will continue here, but it was good to have Grant Mona on live from Intuit Dome, as this is a Clippers Talk Live. JM1324 says, will you be more active on your YouTube this season, Grant? He will be. That's a fact. I've talked with him about this. Jay says, just got off work. I'm going to have to rewind it for the drive, but I did catch James's media on my lunch and like what I heard, and I like how he's looking. Hopefully he walks the walls. Is it because of the Clippers wall? Walks the wall instead of the walk? I don't know. He did talk for a bit. I like what James Harden said too. Walks the walk is what he meant there. So we've pretty much gone through, God, I want to say everybody at this point. Maybe I should just end this so you can go back and listen to the beginning of it. And if any other news breaks later today, I will start another Clippers Talk Live related to Media Day. Coming up tomorrow, we have Noah Eagle coming on, your former radio voice of the Clippers. He will join me here, and maybe I'll talk with somebody from Hawaii at training camp tomorrow night. We'll see. I know they're flying out to Honolulu. They have a game against the Golden State Warriors. That is on Saturday. We'll have it for you on the radio side on AM 570 LA Sports. I believe the pregame show will be starting at 3. Wednesday, I already know I have Tomer Azarli coming on from Honolulu. He'll be joining me Wednesday, so a little bit of a rundown and what to look forward to on the schedule here on Clippers Talk. But if more news breaks, if more comes out, we will have it all for you. I appreciate everybody here that's been in the chat, that has been asking questions here, that has been supporting Ivica Zubac, like EvilBot Adam, who said, Zoo is like my paycheck. It's doing work, but I don't see it. That's pretty funny. I will not be in Hawaii. I got to stay here and help Fred Rogan at AM 570 LA Sports, but I at least had the day off there to some degree. So the work will continue. The content will continue here on the Clippers Talk side. I told you once the Clippers season started, I will not miss a day when it comes to posting and uploading content on YouTube at Clippers Talk. But you can also follow me at Follow Adam A on Twitter, on X, at Clippers Talk on the TikTok, at Clippers Talk. Follow Adam A on the Instagram. Jonathan Ing says, Adam, the Clipper content goat. I don't know about that, but I am posting a lot. So I appreciate the love. I appreciate everybody who's been here for the last 2 hours on Clippers Talk as I drove home midway through the media day session going on because I could just talk to you guys and do a little bit of analysis. Evil Bot Adam says, if you haven't subscribed, what the F are you all waiting for to have the best Clippers analysis and news? Hit the like and subscribe button. I concur. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button. Show a little bit of love here. Mo Asine says, getting Zubac in the Muscala trade was a steal. I said it day one. And he's been excelling his game every year. Zubac is a real one. One of my favorite Clippers of all time already. And he's only been in for, 5.5 seasons now? All right. It's been 2 hours. I got to rest the voice. Maybe I'll get a workout in and come back and do another live later tonight. For that scheduling, just check at Follow Adam A on X. I'll post it there as always. Or if you're subscribed and you hit the little bell button, you'll know when we go live. You'll know when there's a new episode here of Clippers Talk. So for Grant Mona, thanks again for coming on. I'm Adam Oslin. This has been a special edition of Clippers Talk live on Media Day.